Okay, so for the Calla, it was just for the design that I did. Okay, we'll practice and definitely get that one done for you guys. Like I said, I always like to give you more options, and you can always play around with different colors if you want. All right, so I'm probably going to need a little bit more of that coffee latte and good amount of white. We can definitely just put out a little bit at a time for now so that it won't dry out on you and get thick. Okay, so if you do want to do some practice and take a break and then come back and do your design with some fresh paint again. Okay, so then we're also going to need some burnt umber. Okay, so like I said, you're always going to need at least 3 colors. That's the, we're going to need that, but a little bit later. That's our chocolate brown shimmer, that metallic paint that I used. And then also, since we're on the topic of metallic paint here, you can also pop in a little bit of antique copper. And then there's also another one that's really cool if you want to stay in those tones, is a fire opal that you can pop in there as well. It's a little bit lighter, orangier. Okay, but we'll save that for later there. And pop in just a little bit of burnt umber is all we need for some extra shading. Okay, so there's a couple ways of doing this. Depending on how you feel in your journey, then definitely, there's some quicker ways to doing things, and then you can pop things in and do things a little bit slower as well, and baby step your way in a little bit. All right, so we can put 2 colors, 3 colors, 4 colors on our brush all at once. All right, but to get these started, I definitely just concentrated on the 2 colors for now. So if you see on this other version there that I'm going to show you guys when I get started, I have some that I started and some I continued on and added the shading to already. All right, so you'll see the ones that have just the 2 colors in it. And yeah, I had like a basic dirty white going on, because definitely when you're doing more flipping like we do with the leaves, then I'm going to show you some more tricks that we're going to do, and you don't have to worry about it getting it that bright white when you're going to add more to it. And then you can always add more highlights and more shading to it after, guys. Okay, so that's where I gave you that little extra notes here on the side where I actually used the 3rd color for shading after, as opposed to putting it all together in the 1 strokes. Okay, so we're going to start off with simple strokes to remind you from the intro program. All right, so if you guys feel like this is a little bit beyond above you, then please definitely go visit some of my courses in the intro program, or take the whole complete. I got 12 courses there now that will definitely give you lots of practice and be able to tackle this project. Okay, so it is considered to be a little bit of a intermediate type style. Okay, somebody who's definitely feeling comfortable with their 1-stroke techniques, but like I said, it's something that you could definitely just keep practicing, and you'll be able to get it, and then come back to the completion part of the design, and then put it all together with me, even if it's on a mock canvas paper for the first time, and just practice these techniques. And like I said, when you're practicing on cardstock, sometimes it's a little bit harder. It's more drier, you got to put more medium in there, it's a little bit going to be fighting, resisting you, and where the canvas is going to be a little bit smoother because you have a previously painted background on there. So you could, put a mock background on here too, but then of course paper will warp on you if it's really, really wet. So like I said, let's just practice the strokes, put it all together, show you how it's all done, and then when we go and do the actual canvas together, then you'll see the process of how I create all the stems and placement and put stuff together. Okay, so we'll start off with some simple strokes, and basically to remind you guys, about your teardrop strokes. Okay, so teardrop strokes basically have the V, and you have your pivot point that's not going to move. Okay, and you push that over, and we have our teardrop, right? So it's basically the movement that you're doing all the way over and then down and around. Okay, so then there's different variations of teardrops. Some of them we can make a little bit more pointy, and then we're going to come down and around and have that close point at the end. Okay, so basically that's all the calla lilies are, is just a little bit more pointy on the top, and then you're going to come down and around and then pop that back in there again. Okay, so we definitely want a little bit of medium in there to help us, because we are stretching this out. You can see how I've made it just a little bit bigger. Okay, taking advantage of that same size brush, same size 12. Okay, and then you can play around with your little points, come down a little bit straight, and then push it out again, and that'll give you a little bit more of an interesting top for it. Okay, so this is basically the shape that you're looking for the main part of our calla lily. Right, we have a little bit more parts to it, okay, because they have like a belly type bell bottom kind of look to them. All right, so you'll see on your example, the first one I did was actually a little bit too fat. Okay, so you do want to make them a little bit more skinnier. Gonna come down and pull that up again. Okay, so it's very similar. Our use strokes that we use for our rosebuds, happy face use stroke. Okay, but basically now we're just coming down a little bit longer, okay, and giving it a little bit of a V shape in it. All right, and then also if you noticed I did a little bit of a flick out, okay, to give it that little bit of an angle, so you can come in, swoop it down on a little bit of a bell at the bottom, come up, and then push it back out again. Okay, so it's a little bit more dramatic. Okay, just slide down, up, and then kind of out. All right, so you have that narrowness, and then it kind of comes out again. All right, so a little bit more advanced shaping there going on. So again, so a lot of times I will use the back of my brush and play around and make things a little bit more neater, you know, to fix things, okay? But you don't have to worry too much about all this white in here, okay? So this is going to be actually more, a little bit more darker, okay? Less white, and then we're definitely going to add another layer onto that, okay? So always start off always with our little bell first, okay? And then move that up, and bring that up and leave that like a little V. Okay, and you don't even have to worry too much about your coverage right now, because we are going to go over this area again. Okay, and now this is where we're going to tuck our big teardrop with a point and a little twist to it right into that V. Okay, so you're going to come up and you're going to pump that right out, because you want that side to be wider than your base. Okay, then it's good to come down all in one stroke and do that little bit of a hump, and then bring it right back in again. Okay, because when you go and flip your page around and try to do it this way, you can, but you'll tend to be a bit of a cookie cutter, and you'll have your shape, you know, a little bit differently. Okay, so yes, you can do it, but definitely I encourage you to try and get these strokes all done in one movement, going up and down and around, just like a huge teardrop. And if you miss a little bit in the middle, don't worry about it. You can just color that in a little bit, smooth out any gloppiness that you might have, okay? And then smooth that stroke out if you need to. And make sure that you've got your coverage, okay? So you do want to have that nice light area around in the end as well. Okay? So now we're going to get a little trickier here, and we need to practice some of these, what I call dolphin noses, okay? Very similar to your common strokes that you were doing before. but you're going to put a little bit of a tail on, a little bit of a nose on there, and then push and then pull. Okay, then you're going to practice on the other side, and lean to the left-hand side, and then pull around. Okay, so these strokes are done in a lot of different flowers, but how we're going to do this a little bit differently is we need to pull that down and make it a little bit straighter, and we're going to pull it down. Okay, and then instead of trying to do the other side, which is sometimes harder to do on the other side, or if you're left-handed, it'll be the other way for you. This might be the easy one. But to make things easier, I usually come down on the left side here, which would be the other side for left-handed people, and then to come up on the other side, a little bit long and straight, and then up with your point to meet around your teardrop. Okay, so it's a little bit longer stretch of a stroke than some of the other ones that we've done. Okay, so where we're going to start our stroke is we're going to just start wisping it in right here, just as we're getting around that belly, just underneath here. Okay, so this is where we're going to pop that in very lightly, drag a little bit with your nose, come down with your little hump, and then move it straight down into your little ball part. Okay, so depending on if we want to do side versions or depending on how you want to play with it, sometimes you'll even leave that one side open and only close the other side. Okay, so I do have some that you'll see that are a little bit more flipped over than the other. So sometimes if you make the one side bigger than the other side or just flip more dominantly on one side, it'll definitely make it look like it's curved kind of down and over to the side a little bit. And then you can pop in your little stamen in there and it'll look like it's coming up in different directions. Okay. So for practice, we definitely want to show you how to close them on both sides. Okay. So you're just going to come up just slightly on the inside of here. You can overlap just slightly if you want. Come up, pop up with a little bit of pressure, and then slowly slide up on your chisel. Just slide up around the bottom part of your other side, okay? So again, sometimes we're going to have some dirtiness or not blended areas that you didn't come out as wide. So you can always just go ahead and just use the bottom of the corner of your brush. All right, smooth things out. Okay, get that coverage going, and then just come up and smooth over that stroke again, and it'll all blend into one again. All right. We definitely want to practice some in different directions. All right, so when you force yourself to start and want it to flip over into the other side, then you definitely want to start up on the top part of the calla lily first. Give it a little bit of a curl, then slide down just a little bit, and then push down and around and under. Okay. So there is ways of doing your little flips that you can do, okay, when you're coming down and around and under. You could just lift up in your brush and give the top part of a little bit of a curl and flip that in there as well, okay? So sometimes it's easier to do on one side than more than the other side, okay? So depending on the direction that you're pushing it in, right? So you're going to put that a little bit of a point up there. Okay, so push that in, pop up on your chisel, flip that corner over, and flip it all in one stroke. Okay, so again, sometimes I'll just color that in a little bit if I need to. Okay, because I'm trying to get that width here, right? So sometimes we're too far away from our center line, and we have a little bit of an opening there. But that's okay, because we do want to have that bit of a fatness there. Okay. There's different ways of doing it, definitely. You can see from my examples, you know, if you really wanted it to be over on its side, then you're going to come over like your heart-shaped leaves, and you're going to come right over, curl that right over, and give yourself a point. Okay. The only reason why I stopped is because A, I'm showing you slowly, and I just know that I don't have enough paint to follow me through. Okay, so again, you can always make this side just a little bit smaller. Okay. And then again, if you do want to make it a little bit more heart shape, then you're going to have to flip it over a little bit more. And you can come around and do it from the back, especially if you're doing a heart shape one. So this one is definitely a little bit more advanced here. Okay. And then just when you're having a little bit of streakiness or hard time blending, just add just a little tiny bit of floating medium into the stroke and go over it again, and that'll smooth things up really nicely. Okay. So this is where I did a little bit more an advanced one here. All right. And then I tucked in that belly part more under here. Okay, so it's a little bit off filtered here, it looks like, but then with the little extra shading that you're going to do is going to tie that in there. Okay, so you definitely always want to put your little bell shapes in there first. Okay, so you can see that it's hard to tuck them in after, right? So you get the placement, and you definitely want them to be a little bit more longer and a little bit more skinnier. This one's a little bit too fat. But you're getting the whole idea, hopefully, of this particular one here. Okay. And then this will, like I said, you play around with this. This is just way too fat and too curly here. So it's got to be a little bit more straighter. And you can see by my finished result that I'm just playing around here. But I really wanted just to show you how to do this top part here. Okay, so if you want to try it, you can. All right, and then use that as placement. Okay, so like I said, this is coming up just right behind the bottom here. And then I add that little bit of extra shading underneath here. And then that helps to separate things here as well. Okay, so this is not my neatest one, but hopefully you guys can get the gist of it. All right. And then again, if you had that shading in your brush as well all at the same time, it's going to darken things. Okay, so when you guys are practicing and sending me stuff and I see this X through it, I know that it's not a very good one, and you just moved on and kept practicing because it's only paper. Alright, so like I said, definitely your first step is always putting your little bell in. Okay, make it a nice shape. Alright, and then pop in your side on top of it. And so you know that it's going to come around here, so you can go right on top of it very easily. Okay, show you a little bit better of one. And so you're coming down and around and to your point. Coming around and to your point. Okay, so for this one, like I said, guys, you definitely have to turn it around to get your heart shape in there. Okay, but on a canvas, you'll see that it would be really easy to erase this little point that you might have gone over twice, or you don't like the way it ends. You can always erase stuff, right? So you guys are a little bit too hard on yourself when you're playing on cardstock, because you know you can easily erase on those canvases, guys. And I'm going to show you that I'll probably have to do that a couple times. If I don't like what I'm doing, I just pick it off and restroke it again. Okay, or I'll just keep adding paint to it, like in this one, and keep playing with it until I get that gradient nice and smooth that I'm looking for. Okay, so sometimes we have to let things dry and go over it again. Don't be afraid to try and then smooth things out. All right, so like I said, sometimes we do like to play around and triple load our brush. All right, and then what you're doing is you're coming over and you're blending your two colors. All right, and then you can come over and then side load just that little bit of dark color. right? And then yes, you would get that highlight, shade, and color, three colors all in one. But sometimes your dark color tends to take over your dark color, okay? And then it also will follow you up and around in your stroke work, okay? So this is why I prefer to do my work with the Calla lilies all with just two colors for now, right? And then what you're going to do is you're going to clean your brush and then just come over, pick up a little bit of floating medium, a little bit of burnt umber, and just side load just that tiny little bit of color on the edge. And then add a little bit more floating medium so you can push that over and get just that little bit of a line going on your plate. Okay? So when you have that nice thin line on your plate, then you know that you've got control over it just on the one corner of your brush. And then that's when I come in and I add these little extra shading in, so then I can control where I put that shading. And I want to put it just in along that line and then leave that little bit of a white spot right in there, so then that way it looks like the rim of the calla lily popping out. Okay, so there's just a little bit of shading tricks that you need to learn, and you can make this look really advanced. All right, so you see the difference between this one and this one. Okay, again, I can bring this little bit of shading once you put it back upside down, right? You know, you can play with it and bring this up just a little tiny bit. Okay, so that it looks a little bit soft. Okay, play with it. And then if it's too dark, then you could always add a little bit more floating medium, and then that will help to thin it out, and you can erase it or just put a little bit at a time and step back at it, okay? So if you feel like it's too light, you can always add more to it, go over it again, okay? And a lot of times I'll multitask when I'm doing all these so that I'm building them all, a few of them at a time. Especially in this design, you can see that I did like 11 of them, right? So for tonight, we're actually going to do a little bit more of a simpler design. I'm going to multitask a little bit of a quicker design for you, but I'm still going to introduce you to all these elements in a little bit quicker design for you. And then if you really want to put all 11 in and copy every one of my little stems, then you can definitely do that as well. Right, so we're definitely going to try and keep things a little bit simpler and quicker for this project, and then depending on how you feel, guys, you can definitely bump them up. Okay, so we definitely want to add a little bit more shading down here at the bottom. Okay, and depending on how much this calla lily is flipping this way or that way, then sometimes I'll pick a side to actually go up a little bit more. So generally you're just going around the bottom. Okay, and a little bit heavy, add a little bit more floating medium, and it'll kind of push that back down again and add that little bit of smaller line there for you. Okay, and then if it was flipped over on this side, then I would shade on the bottom of this way. It's flipped over on this side, then I would shade a little bit over on this side. Okay, so this side is a little bit bigger, right? So depending on where you put your little separation line, it is nice to be able to put them over to one side or right down the middle or over to the sides. So it will really depend on where you're putting them, on what angle. Okay, and then just adding that little extra shading along one side will really help to intensify the roundness of the bell here too. Right. And then what we're going to do is actually you can pick up three colors or you can pick up two colors, but definitely for your little stamen, right? All it is me just tapping, okay? Just tapping it a little bit wide at a time. Okay, you can move up a little bit, make it a little bit longer depending on how big you've made it. Okay, and then pick up some fresh white. Okay, you can just leave it like that if you want, just tapping. Come out just a little bit wider, almost like an ice cream cone kind of look, right? And then if you want, then you can always go and tap it a little bit more, make it a little bit more like a ball. And then I'll play with the other corners of my brush as well, and then just make it a little bit dirty and mottled and muted. Okay, but you still want it to be a little bit brighter. So if you do want to pop in that little extra shading at the bottom, you could always just tap in just that little tiny little bit of darkness at the bottom. Right? So we can multi-load our brush and then just go pick up that little bit of, just that little bit of burnt umber. Okay? And then tap that right in there, right in the corner, down here, right in the middle, because this is like a top front view. Okay, so sometimes when they are flipped in different directions, especially like that little guy, you're seeing just a very little kind of stamen coming out of him because it's just out the middle, and you may not see the length of that one. Okay, that's a little bit bigger. But definitely having that little extra shading in there, like if we go in there and add that little extra shading in there before you put your stamen in, then you'll definitely have a little bit more of a hollow look. Kind of floating this in there now after the fact. But definitely you want to be able to have that shading in there. Okay, and you can intensify your little flips. So then that way they'll stand out a little bit more. Okay. Adding that little extra details. And I'll show you through the whole process with the design as well, how I treat each one a little bit differently. Okay, so just keep practicing the basic strokes of it. Remember that they're all numbered for you on your sheet. Just make sure that's there for you beside your work while you're practicing so you can remember how you did them. Do your little bell first, then your main part of your flower, and then just close it in to the bottom of your little bell. Okay, and then we're going to put our little stems in underneath, and then a lot of times I'll put the dark underneath there too. Okay, and you can see by my example that I gave you guys, and I'll show you through the process of the video of how we put our little stems in there a little bit differently. Okay, so just keep practicing that main one, and then when you're ready you can move on to the next part where we're going to play around with our leaves, and I'll show you how we're going to do some advanced flipped leaves.